my first time coming to Japan was because of entertainment. And I came as a writer for the first time in 2003 for MTV, writing a screenplay based on a manga. And I then was living in Los Angeles, probably worked on the worst movie I had ever worked on in my career. And I said, you know what? I need a break. And I came back to Japan on the JET program. And so that's kind of where I kind of do my start of the clock, so to speak, of coming to Japan was in 2005 with the JET program, which means next year will be my 20th year. But starting off in the entertainment film, I actually started off after I went to Ithaca College in upstate New York, and after college I started working as a production assistant. And these are some of the films and projects that I worked on as a PA. And so this gave me kind of my cinematic foundation professionally, and got a chance to meet many, many people, work with many, many folks. If you look closely in a couple of these films, you will see me in them. I will not say what because it's a little bit embarrassing now. But then there was Homicide: Life on the Street, which kind of started to change for me in terms of my professional career, because I actually did work on the show as a production assistant. And then if you see here, I actually was an actor in an episode. And finally, I became a writer on the show. And I was on the show for 2 seasons as a writer. But as I was working on as a PA and other things, I was always wanting to be a filmmaker. And that's been a goal of mine since I was, 17 years old. And I started writing screenplays, my first screenplay at 17 on a typewriter. Yes, typewriter, before there were using computers, anything. And that began my journey. And then about 10 years later, I was able to make my first featured film called Detention. And that got my career started as a filmmaker. The film screened at festivals around the world. It earned the Best Director Award at the Urban Will Film Festival. And it was shot on a relatively low budget. In fact, it was shot on a thread budget. We shot in 12 days on 12 grand. And eventually wound up with a DVD deal, and it was able to get into the marketplace. Then it took me a little bit more longer to actually shoot my next film, because we shot it in 2014. So it was a little bit of a gap between the first feature and the second feature, and life happened in between. And we shot my second film called Stay here in Japan. And the thing is, my journey in Japan kind of changed my journey as a filmmaker, because initially as a filmmaker, I was like, I'm only going to do Black stories. And then when I came to Japan, I said, you know what? I can do stories because we're all human. And we can figure out how we can connect with each other as people, as human beings, in telling stories. And so Stay is pretty much a Japanese main character in a story that I was originally going to set in the States, but then I learned some stuff in Japan that kind of informed the story. And I said, I could tell this story in Japan and find a way of connecting and beginning the process of building bridges as a filmmaker. And I've always been surprised at where my career has taken me, because a couple of years ago I had the opportunity to work on a show for an online company called Wondrium, and I got to direct in Ghana the first 3 episodes of a show called Discovering West Africa, Ghana, Senegal, and Cameroon. So as a guy who comes from Baltimore, and having worked on projects not only in my hometown, in Los Angeles, in Japan, and Africa, it's like, wow, I've done stuff in 3 different continents. Film has taken me around the world. So that's why I talk about, and I encourage people to travel and to go out, see the world. And so I talk about that in the context of, we're out here. You have people who are different colors, different races, who are African American, Africans, here around the world. And I think that can translate into the projects that we see and the arts. Because one of the things we hear is that black films don't travel. And does anybody know what that means? Black films don't travel.
It means they do well in the United States, but overseas they may not necessarily resonate.
Okay, that's good. Anybody else want to give a... Everybody's pretty much on board? Yeah, pretty much, yeah. It's the misconception, though, or stereotypes that the films with predominantly black cast or stories centered around black characters may not perform well internationally. And there's a quote from Ava DuVernay, that says, if you want to have a fun exercise, think about your favorite films made by black directors, starring black folks, and go and check and see how they were distributed worldwide. Usually they're not distributed around the world because of this perception. But the interesting thing is about film is there's a general rule of thumb that a film must make 3 times its budget to be profitable. 3 times. So if you make a film and it's $5 million, in order for that film to be profitable, you have to make about $15 million. Okay? And so I'm going to show you a few films that, black cast, black directors, that did kind of well. I'm not sure, maybe seen Hidden Figures. Budget of $25 million. Grossed $240 million. Not bad. Get Out. $4.5 million budget. $255 million. $79 million internationally. 12 Years a Slave, $20 million budget. $188 million worldwide. Straight Outta Compton, movie about NWA, a hip-hop group, well-known hip-hop group, but kind of controversial, especially when they came out. But their story cost $28 million, made over $200 million, kind of surpassing that 3 times mark. Let's see, $40 million just worldwide. Precious. Let's see, $10 million budget, $63 million. Girls Club, $19 million, $140. Beautiful film, Moonlight. $4 million budget, $65 million. And the one I like to say is probably the granddaddy of all, Black Panther. Which probably some people would say is the outlier that because it's a Marvel movie, but it was a $200 million budget, $1.3 billion, So this shows that films can travel, that films can attract audiences outside of their domestic homes. And I think that that's the thing, is that we have to, as filmmakers, as creatives, even as an audience, be willing to take a chance and go out and see films and see works. I remember when I've lived in Japan 18 years, and I went to see Barry Jenkins's film, If Beale Street Can Talk. And it was at the Toho Cinemas in Shibuya. It was packed. I looked at the audience and I'm like, there's nobody who looks like me in the audience. But here's this pack. And so it made me go, if you tell a good story, you can actually have an audience come and see your work. Because at the end of the day, there's a collage of diverse genres of these films. You have historical films, you have comedies, you have dramas. And if you notice, all those films that I showed you weren't just like one type of film. They were diverse. They were all these different voices in terms of storytelling and filmmaking. And I think that that's the thing that pulls audiences in. But yet, I do believe that there are some misses. Because international distribution system is difficult for black filmmakers, brown filmmakers who are outside of the studio system, because most of these films are all from the studios. Me, I'm an independent filmmaker. I haven't done a studio movie. And so I think that that's the other part of it, is that we have to find ways of looking and saying, oh, I haven't seen this, looks interesting. And as an audience, looking at different films and checking out and seeing what these other voices are saying. So like if you're flipping through, even Netflix, you go, oh, let me check this film out. And then sometimes it's good if you watch something like on Amazon and Netflix, write a review, because that helps that filmmaker boost their numbers. It helps boost their eyeballs. And I think the key is also in filmmakers telling compelling stories. I try to tell a compelling story. I hope that, we all like to watch and see and view compelling stories. And I think that's the key, is that as long as filmmakers are telling compelling stories, we as an audience also have to try and say, let me try and just take a chance and see what this filmmaker is saying, what this story is. And the other part of it is about marketing. The studios can market a film if they want to. They can put it out there. They're going to put a lot of money behind a Black Panther. You spend $20 million, you're going to $200 million, you're going to spend $200 million to market. It's harder for the indie filmmakers to market. And so it is all about marketing and finding a way of connecting and building and finding an audience. And I think that's the challenge a lot of filmmakers have, is trying to connect and build and find an audience. And one of the things I do realize is that when I hear that black films don't travel, even from the studio side, because I know it's harder on the indie side, there's a model that's out there, because you have to put people out there to meet people. Because despite the fact that he was a little bit controversial not too long ago, he actually created the model. He would go out and promote himself and travel with his films. Will Smith. This is why Will Smith became an international movie star. When he did Independence Day, the studio didn't pay for him to go out and promote the film. He said, I'll pay for it. That's why he became popular in Japan. That's why he became popular in Korea, why he became popular in Europe, because he went out and put himself out there, showed who he is, and had relationships with the audience. And then when he made his next movie, people went because he went out there. And I think that's going to be the key for filmmakers, for actors, and building an audience, is being out there into the public sphere and talking to people. Because I remember when I went to go see If Beale Street Can Talk, Barry Jenkins came to Japan. And I think that's the reason why that theater was crowded, is because he came here, he promoted his film, people saw him, heard what he had to say, and then they were encouraged to go see the film. Because it's a very small film, it's a very intimate story, but I could feel the audience moving with the story and watching that film in the theater. And so one of the things I'm trying to do as a filmmaker is what I call black faces in international spaces. And because, again, I say our films can travel because we do travel. We're all over. You have black people in Japan, you have black people in Korea, you have everywhere. Now, we're all over the world. And so our stories and experience and perspectives cross borders. I'm sure many people have heard of hip hop, jazz. These are the experiences that have reggae. I'm actually looking forward to seeing the new Bob Marley movie that's coming out. Oh God, I want to see that movie. But it's the authenticity of those stories, because they pull people in from all around the world. And again, these are the stories that I think help show our collective humanity in terms of the stories that are being told and what we watch on the screen. And look, like I said, it's always a challenge, because even as Ava says, is that if you've made an independent film like she has, you are doing it hand to hand on your own, and we have to find ways of finding connections, okay? And my thing is, we all have ways to be the change that we seek. And that's the goal that I am trying to do as a filmmaker, as a professor, just as a person, and as a human being. Because I'm trying to get even my next film off the ground, which is called Polaris, which I want to shoot here and in my hometown of Baltimore. And this is me now beginning that process of showing films and trying to create work that features Black faces, international spaces. It's a story about a chef who loses his sense of taste and comes to Japan to fulfill his father's final wish. It's a love story. I'm also in the process of working with an organization and reviving an organization called the Japan Afro-American Friendship Association. And through this organization, we're looking to continue that process of building cultural bridges and bringing not only folks from the diaspora, but Japan together in conversation. And it's not just us trying to learn, we want to learn from the Japanese community and find out what they want to teach us. Because I think we have to be willing to learn just as much as we also want to teach as well. And even recently, we're going to have a screening coming up of a film from the US called gOD-TALK, which was made by the African American History and Culture Museum in Washington, D.C. at the Smithsonian. So that'll be coming up later on this month for Black History Month. And so I'll talk about that a little bit later. And so that is the end of my talk. Thank you very much. どうもありがとうございます。よろしくお願いします。